Then we get the scores from the incompetent judges of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. 1 round for Conor McGregor. Of the 9 completed rounds, 1 round went to Conor. Floyd Mayweather would not agree with that. Floyd Mayweather Sr., Roger Mayweather, Ellerby, nobody. Floyd's kids. Take the most biased people you could think of. That's what I'm trying to do right now. They would not agree with that. Because it did not go a decision, there will be no light shined on those 3 judges. The unbelievable incompetence of those 3 people getting ready to rob Conor McGregor. Because it did not go to a decision, nothing will happen. Had it gone to a decision, the Nevada State Athletic Commission would still do nothing. You just hear reports of it all over the place. Because it wasn't factored in, it'll be like it never happened. There will be no talking to any of those judges. There will be no written explanation needed. There will be no verbal explanation needed in the back. Hey, how'd you have those rounds? Sure looked to me. CompuBox. Everybody else watching. Floyd himself sure looked to me like Conor won 4 of the first 6 without argument. Nothing will happen other than they will use the fact that they were assigned to the mega fight in history to get themselves to the next big main event world title fight. It's corrupt. It's dirty. It's why boxing is dying. It's why boxing is failing. And nothing will happen. That's frustrating. That really is frustrating. You took a guy like Conor that went out there, did what he needed to do, and they were setting him up. They were setting him up from Jump Street. Walked away with rounds 1, 2, and 3. Walked away, not even a debate. None. They gave him 1 round. I had a bet, $100,000 with Brendan Schaub. He ran his mouth and he put it out there. And the bet was that Conor would win rounds. And I said, no, he won't. He will not win rounds. Not if you're pluralizing it. That means 2 or more, Brendan wins. But I knew he won it. Just logic said he won. It's a great bet. If you're a handicapper, you got to take that action. Got a guy that's an amateur versus a guy that's never lost. He's not going to win rounds. Even money. My 100 versus his 100. I could not get that at the windows. It was 6-1. So if you want to bet, you got to take Brendan's bet. So I took it. So I watched that fight. I was not armed with the fact that the 3 corrupt judges gave Conor 1 round. So the next morning, I took Brendan his money. Brendan refused the money. He said, actually, Chael, you're wrong. I owe you. And I just stood there and looked at him. He said, I owe you. He goes, dude, you haven't seen the judges' cards, have you? And I said, no. So he brings it up. John Morgan had posted it at MMA Junkie. And he brings it up and he shows me. Well, Conor had only won a round, not rounds, plural. So I won. I didn't feel right taking Brendan's money because that was crook. That's not what happened, regardless of the incompetence. And I realize, betting's a real hard line in Vegas. You're right, like it or don't like it, you get that ticket, it's printed. Private bets are the same way. You make a handshake and you don't discuss the in-between. You got to take it straightforward or you're not an honorable man. But I couldn't take his money either because it's not what happened. And I just told him, man, we just shook hands and walked away, laughed it off, and that was it. I came home and my wife said, where's your $100,000? I said, honey, I watched that fight. Those crooked judges, Brendan and I are just going to have to push this to the next one. I'm filling you in on that because Chris Camozzi was texting me the whole time, wondering who and then was feeling for him. He's like, man, you lost that money to Brendan. And then he looked at the cards himself and he's like, no, wait a minute. You won that money from Brendan. So that's really neither here nor there. Amongst 2 gentlemen, Brendan and I called it a draw, but it was an amazing performance by Conor. And, Floyd defended himself too. None of this is even to put Floyd down. Floyd turned his back 4 times. That's illegal in boxing. You cannot turn your back. And I thought that referee could have got a little bit more involved. That is not a fight that I wish to pick. I like how the referee did it. I understand the rules of boxing. He should have been more involved. There was even some rabbit punches there by Conor, totally illegal. He let him go. It turned into a street fight. I liked it. And I think that was one of Floyd's biggest problems. I sat next to Teddy Atlas. Teddy Atlas couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had it the same way I did. Four of the first 6 went to Conor. And you could argue 6 of the first 6, but for sure 4 of the first 6. And Teddy said that. He said Floyd's never been in there with a street fighter. Teddy was confident the entire time Floyd was going to come back. He could see the fatigue setting in with Conor. He could see that Floyd was fresh because he hadn't done a goddamn thing. But he was surprised at what he was seeing. He was surprised at round after round after round going to some kid from Ireland who decided to throw some gloves on after training for 8 months. He was surprised. CompuBox numbers came out. Put this in perspective for you guys if you haven't heard this yet. Manny Pacquiao fought all 12 rounds with Floyd, landed exactly 100 punches. Conor didn't even go 10 full rounds with Floyd, landed 111 punches. Okay, the guy can box. And the talk about what's next for Conor, I personally believe it's going to be in MMA. I personally believe it's going to be the end of December, a trilogy with Nate Diaz. Yes, I have inside information on that. I'm not breaking news. Not breaking news, but I do have inside information, and that's what I think it's going to be. Some people say, yeah, but the money's in boxing. Well, that's not true. I mean, you got to be careful with that. The biggest purses ever have come from boxing. That is a factually, historically correct statement. But to say more money comes in boxing isn't true because those fights come along once every 2 years. And boxing will be lucky if it can pull it off once every 2 years with Floyd stepping aside. Now, if one of these guys, and I'm talking about either Canelo or Triple G, if one of those guys can grab the torch and run with it, great. Maybe we'll keep seeing these big mega fights, but then they're going to need opponents and some things are just going to have to line up. They're just going to have to line up right. So the biggest money has come in boxing. That is true, but not the most money. MMA, between Bellator and the UFC, they're paying out millions of dollars and they're doing it every single Saturday, not just once every couple of years. So I think that Conor's going to return. If you want to speculate about him in boxing, him versus Floyd, if this gets built up, if you bring in the corruption of the judges, if you bring up the way that it was judged, if you bring in the way that it was refereed, that Floyd was allowed to turn his back 4 times, what he is not allowed to do, you could get some talk going here. You could get some dialogue going for a rematch for this. And the only thing more embellished than Floyd Mayweather's personal wealth is Floyd Mayweather's pay-per-view numbers. Neither is true. Both are great. Neither is true. My point being, this fight was a cash grab. Mr. Billionaire, Mr. Money Floyd, he needed the money. He's going to need the money again. And if the right kind of hype, the right kind of speculation was to come out, and it's got to come out this week. It can't, if they miss this week, they're going to miss the whole thing. You can't light a fire on something that went away. It's a little fire right now, little bit. They got to throw some gas on it. We'll see if they do. But you could see that fight again. You could see that fight again, but we're going to know in the next week here. We're halfway through it already, and I'm not seeing enough buzz going on. I'm seeing more buzz coming in from Paulie's side, which I'm personally down with. I would personally watch Paulie and Conor, but I would rather watch Conor and Nate. I would rather watch Conor and what he does, which is MMA. But his boxing skills cannot be called into question anymore. Absolutely not. His courage can't be. Nothing about Conor can be called into question. There is no fakeness there. There's a showman, sure, but he means everything that he says, and he's got the skills to back it up. And rhetorically, I don't have the words to give you as big of a compliment as I feel is owed to Conor. I want to give him the biggest compliment I can. I'm trying. I just don't know what to say. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing that a guy who had never done it went a half of an hour with the best to have ever done it and still never fell down. Still never fell down. Referee stepped in and said, you're not defending yourself enough. Okay, fair enough. That's part of the sport. We can stop and go home here. But it's been a half an hour. He landed 111 shots. He took over 111 shots and stayed standing. Fatigue set in. It should have set in. It was absolutely remarkable. I'll give you guys something else. This was driving me nuts all week. I really like to operate in the realms of reality. That's important to me. when you're dealing with a true sport. If we're talking about WWE, let's believe whatever we want to believe. Okay? That's a movie. That's for fun. But this is supposed to be a real sport. So they bring out a fake belt that's worth $344 and claim that it's $1 million, and people eat that up. I mean, it was an ugly belt on top of that. It's a weightlifting belt, for God's sakes, with a little plate put in the middle of it. 2 kilograms of solid 14-karat gold, 138 diamonds. And then he just left it in the lobby of the MGM Grand, and nobody even tried to steal it. Everybody knew it was fake.